to solve their own problems of practice and to eliminate disparities along the lines of race. Today, the DCC team will update us about their work so far, some lessons learned, and lead us through a workshopping activity aimed at improving your work with your own home districts. With us today are Paul Byrne, Senior Director of District Charter Partnerships, Mike Stoll, DCC's Director, Kate Karageorgiou, DCC's Facilitator, and Wing Wing Xiao, DCC's Program Manager, as well as Kathleen Stone-Joseph, also DCC's Facilitator. Welcome all. Thank you for joining us today. I look forward to the discussion.
Great. Thank you so much for the introduction, Yumika. I really appreciate that. So I'm Mike Stoll. I'm the Director of District Charter Collaborative, and we are definitely looking forward to sharing our work with you today. One of the things that we always center around in our work to begin with is celebration and community building and making sure that we're collaborating together in positive and fruitful ways. So can everybody see my screen, by the way? Good. So I'm going to throw a little prompt up on the screen, just to ask you in the chat to post up one thing you are truly proud of from this past school year. It could be a moment, it could be an initiative, a mindset shift, any other occurrence that inspires or informs your practice going out of 2019-20 and into 2020-21. So if you could just do a quick 1-2 sentence summary of something you're proud of in that chat, that'll be a great place for us to center our work to begin with. I will say for me, I am proud of our program's transition to online learning. Oh, hi, Pablo. Nice to see you. I'm glad to hear that. That's awesome. And definitely, as people are posting those in, give them a quick read and see what people are sharing. You know, one about an equity PLC, growth of math teachers, first graduating class, pivoting to strong instruction in online setting. A lot of amazing stuff so far. Nice to see you, Tim. Yeah, that's really awesome. And you had a really challenging set of circumstances for the first year, but that's really super cool. So I'm going to encourage you to keep posting those things up while we do a little framing for this time. Just to jump back a slide here, we're going to do this little introduction. We won't be too long in that. We're going to do an overview of all of our work and our learnings. We're then actually going to do breakout groups and have folks talk about some things that surface for you and try and utilize your wisdom and our wisdom to think about those things. And then we're gonna close for this time. Does that sound good to everybody? Cool. See a couple thumbs up, a couple things there. So just to give a little bit of framing before I hand it off to my colleague, Paul, we spent the last 4 years doing district charter collaborative work and building collaborative relationships between charter and district schools in the New York City Department of Education, one of the largest, or the largest in the country. And it's been really insightful work. It's been really impactful for myself professionally, for our team professionally, and hopefully for our schools. And so we're super excited to share what we've learned today and hopefully build into how you could benefit from similar collaborations with your districts, with other schools, etc. With no further ado then, I'm gonna hand it over to Paul Byrne, who's the Senior Director of District Charter Partnerships in the DOE. Paul, just let me know as you want me to move slides.
Sure. Thank you, Mike. Appreciate it. And good afternoon, everyone. It's great to be here with you. We are from New York City, so we like to brag about how big we are. So I'll start there with some context about the New York City Department of Education and our charter school sector. NYC DOE has 1.1 million students across 1,900 schools. You see the numbers of students that are economically disadvantaged, who have IEPs, and who are multilingual learners there. And our charter school sector, next slide, please, Mike. to give you a point of comparison, has 126,000 students in 260 schools, slightly more or higher percentage of students that are economically disadvantaged, slightly less number of students who have IEPs, and a significant dip in the number of students who are multilingual learners. But it gives you a sense of the size of the charter school sector within the DOE. It's roughly 11% of students at this point. Next slide, Mike. The heart of district charter partnerships and the district charter collaborative is really this idea that we are collectively responsible for the well-being and the success and the outcomes of each of our students. Whether they attend district schools or charter schools, they are our students, and we owe them the very best that they deserve on a daily basis when they walk into our schools. And all of our work is kind of designed to bring schools together then to help each other grow and learn from each other to ensure that the best practices are being spread across schools across the city. Next slide. So we got our start in 2015 in the fall when Mayor de Blasio announced district charter partnerships as part of his equity and excellence agenda. And from that point on, we built our programming out. Next slide, please, Mike. Our goal is simply to improve student experiences and outcomes in all public schools across the city by facilitating the sharing of strategies and tools between district and charter schools. And we do that through a range of different programs. You can go on, Mike. Thank you. This year, our main focus has been in these two types of partnerships: school-to-school partnerships and charter network partnerships. The District Charter Collaborative team that is here with us this afternoon is our largest partnership school-wise, and we'll hear more about the work that they do. But this year they've been working with 48 schools across 12 different partnerships. We have campus district charter partnerships, which focuses on co-located school buildings in New York City that have district and charter schools sharing space. As you are probably aware, that is a common point of tension between the two sectors. And this partnership has been aimed at building collaboration and relationships between schools that share buildings. And then we have partnerships with Uncommon, with KIP, and with Achievement First, where they provide professional learning around some of their strongest practices for the district school teachers and school leaders across New York City. The Uncommon Impact is focused on instructional leadership strategies. KIP's partnership is focused on the college match process, and Achievement First is focused on their math stories curriculum. Next slide, please, Mike. For the District Charter Collaborative, we have facilitated collaboration between district and charter schools with the goals of improving instructional practices and student outcomes while building schools' capacity to solve their own problems of practice and eliminate disparities along lines of race. We provided the tools, learning, and space to confront issues of equity and began to address them at participating schools. We did this by grouping schools into partnerships of 4, 2 district and charter schools, where schools are individually kind of exploring their own problem of practice and engaging in an inquiry process, and collectively engaging in intervisitations where they're sharing feedback and thought partnering with each other. It pains my heart to see this slide written in the past tense, and unfortunately District Charter Partnerships is mostly winding down at the end of this school year as a victim of some of the budget cuts that are being felt very strongly across the state and the city. So we are winding down our work, and happy to share a little bit more with you about it today, though, some of the lessons learned. I believe
Kathleen, you're
Kathleen.
muted.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, I was muted. Hi, I'm Kathleen Joseph, and it's great to be here with you all today. So I'm just going to share some key information about our program structure and how our program worked. We had 2 program leaders, Mike and Paul, who you've just met, 3 program facilitators, Kate, who's on today's call, myself, and Tanisha, who wasn't able to join today. And we also had 6 school-based facilitators, 3 of them from our charter schools and 3 of them from our district schools. And we really loved that we piloted this version this year and had a lot of success with that model. And we have our operations manager, Win-Win, who's also on our call today. So just information about us as overall. We were a 2-year program for our schools. We had about 50% district and 50% charter schools that participated. And each school had a school team that consisted of, in general, a principal, assistant principals, school team coordinators, a school team coordinator for each team, teachers, parent coordinators, student and community members, and the school teams met at least every 2 weeks, sometimes more often. Schools worked in quads or triads, and the quads or triads met once a month in the form of intervisitations. And so they visited one another's schools, and that was where a lot of the collective learning happened. Our schools were very spread out. We were present in all 5 boroughs of New York City and in 16 geographic districts in New York City as well. These are just some of the learning focus areas that our schools engaged in collaborative learning around. They included specially designed instruction, supporting multilingual learners, restorative practices, career and technical education, math instruction, family and community empowerment, literacy across the content areas, and STEAM or STEM. And we focused on meeting the needs of our school communities, fostering inter-school collaboration within these learning focus areas, and supporting schools to adopt evidence-based practices for school improvement. And as we've already mentioned, there was a very strong focus on how this collaborative learning could really boost the learning for particularly our Black and Latino students. And so I can share our racial equity purpose statement. Like other DOE programs, our overarching goal is to improve outcomes for New York City students. At the DCC, we are particularly committed to addressing the racial inequities affecting Black and Latino students, as they make up 67% of the total population in our public schools and 90% of the population in our charter schools. Our current school system perpetuates clear discrepancies in opportunities and outcomes along lines of race. In order to address these racial inequities in our schools, we must work and learn together by engaging in thoughtful reflections, conversations, and collaborative actions around this issue. And so this really guided the learning activities of our schools and the ways in which they determine which academic practices and school-based practices that they would explore and implement to improve outcomes for students.
Great, thank you so much, Kathleen. So a little bit about our model. At the District Charter Collaborative, we had 4 core elements working together in tandem to achieve our goals. The first is inter-school collaboration, so a belief that schools working together will be better together, and that helped accelerate school improvement through learning with others. The second core element is our school team structure, and so Kathleen mentioned some of the folks who were usually on those school teams. Typically each school team had about 4 to 5 people based at the school that were driving the work at their school. The cycles of learning is the inquiry process that each of the schools took to make changes that they wanted to see in their school. And then professional development was also provided for each of the content areas that schools were working on, which we call our learning focus areas. And essentially the way these work in tandem is that the school teams would work on a problem of practice that was identified by the school team through the inquiry process called the cycles of learning, which accelerated the impact of their school improvement efforts by learning with their quad, the group of 4 schools, and engaging in relevant professional development. And so you can see a few photos of just what, you can visualize a little bit of what these look like. And so this is a photograph of one of our inter-school visits where we actually had students facilitating the day for our STEAM quad a few months ago. And this is an example of how we take the low inference notes throughout our observation of practice. And so we would share noticings and wonderings and then identify trends among that to share with the hosting school for the hosting school's learning as well as the quad's learning. And this is what we call our triple loop learning framework. And so as each year we looked at our inquiry process and thought about ways we could improve it for our own continuous improvement. And so we decided that most recently we would weave in some of the principles of the triple loop learning model with improvement science, and created a framework, or I should say adapted a framework to look at inquiry at each school. And usually each facilitator would support the schools in thinking about how this inquiry process could adapt best to their situations. I know Kathleen read our racial equity purpose statement earlier. One of the newer initiatives that we had, which started this previous school year, was called the Racial Equity Academy. And this was a support that was piloted at the start of the school year, as I said, for school leaders. And the goals of this program were to build school leaders' capacities to address systemic challenges, to provide sustainable and equitable outcomes for all students, and to promote collaborative inquiry across district and charter schools. One of the core components of this Racial Equity Academy was a critical race reflection. And so what that means, at each session, participants were expected to complete an exercise that required them to examine their own identity, racial consciousness, implicit and explicit biases, and lived experiences and privileges in relationship to those of their colleagues, their students, and parents in their school communities. And again, the main goal of this program was to support leadership for equity, and specifically racial equity. One of the ways that we adapted our work as of mid-March, was to provide more collaborative learning opportunities. And so one of the main core of that was just figuring out what schools needed at that point and how might we adapt to those new challenges that were being surfaced by our school members. We conducted a number of collaborative cohort-wide workshops, including an unconference, which was open to all of our schools. Some of the topics that you can see on the slide were included equitable grading and assessment, which we partnered with the Mastery Collaborative of New York City to facilitate that, as well as Dr. Manuel Rustin and Joe Feldman in terms of additional thought leadership. We also partnered with several schools to present an Engaging Families as Partners workshop, including KIP. We also looked at remote learning structures for success, supporting students with IEPs, social emotional learning during remote instruction, leading for equity during COVID-19, and preparing for reentry to the 2020-2021 school year. We also conducted community check-ins with quads virtually. You can see an example of that, one of our many snapshots of Zoom conferences. I love this Zoom, Zoom, boom, boom narration there. That's pretty funny. As well as educator self-care series workshops, where we worked through different self-care strategies with folks from all across the city, because we know how important self-care is, especially during this time with many challenges. And now Yuan will share a little bit more about the DCC impact.
Thanks, Kate. In the past couple of years, we have seen a great impact of DCC work in different areas. First and foremost, we helped foster collaboration between different sectors. You can see from the data that before our program, most schools do not collaborate with cross-sector schools. But after being in the DCC for a year, almost all of them had the chance to engage in this type of collaboration. So our program really provides a unique opportunity for the schools to visit and observe each other's classroom practices and provide valuable feedback. So 90% of our participants agree that they have more knowledge implementing instructional practices in their specific learning focus areas. And this is one of the strong suit of DCC, and we used the inquiry cycle, as Kate has talked about, to support this effort. In DCC, we also focus on developing leaders in schools and helping them to gain leadership skills and experiences. So 94% of our participants have gained leadership skills and experience from DCC work. With our racial equity focus, our participants have also recognized that they have seen a stronger connection between being an educator and the racial equity. We were honored to be featured in 74 Million, so you can read the article with this bit.ly link. This is a kind of a case study for one of our quad, and in that quad, the math proficiency rates for all schools have significantly risen with our DCC work.
So we talked a little bit about the what, we talked about the impact, and I really want to share about what we have learned, right? Because I think that's really the key transferable idea is that, you know, we've done this work, we had it for 4 years, we loved it, we did what we could with it, and we really want you to come away from today with just some key learnings around if you wanted to do this collaboration, if you wanted to benefit from that, what would it look like for you, right? So the first one was really, Paul spoke to this to begin with the James Baldwin quote and just with what he articulated, which is we really realize that coalescing around a common mission is key, right? And so we're going to model in our breakout groups one of the activities we did to build towards that. But essentially, it was really important for us to put some things on the table to really talk about, like, hey, you work in one type of school, I work in another. Let's think about how we give each other. Let's get past some of that and let's say kids matter. We're here to serve them. We're here to ensure their lived experiences are positive and fruitful. And so centering around that was so crucial to how this work happens. The second one is that it's really important to meet schools where they're at, and then to push them to a new place, right? Which is in collaboration, like we all have different strengths, we all have different assets to build into, and different things that are amazing, and then different things that we can grow in. So it was really important for us to recognize what are those strengths, what are those growth areas, to talk about that in the, excuse my dogs in the background there, talk about that in a full group, and move to a new place together and share and do that. The third big learning that we had is that you can't talk about cross-sector collaboration without talking about equity. You can't talk about district and charter schools without thinking about the issues of equity that arise there. You can't think about any of this without really considering how we serve students, how that looks, what the practices are, and what it means to close gaps, what it means to close opportunity gaps, access gaps. And so and to give students opportunities in different ways and what the charter movement means in terms of that, but then also what the role of community schools, district schools are in terms of closing those gaps. So we really upfronted that mission as we went on, and really found that it paid dividends for our schools and for us as a program to be able to tackle those really crucial issues of equity in thinking about cross-sector work. And then lastly, that it's not enough to just visit a school. It's not enough to just see a practice in action. Yes, that's a jumping off point. Yes, that's a place to build from. But that sustained inquiry and improvement cycle work are crucial aspects of leveraging the different strengths and different growth areas of district and charter schools. And so we would have people visit each other, we would see those practices, and then go back and work in teams to really think about how do we build that out in our individual contexts, because those contexts are so different, even if it's just from neighborhood to neighborhood, from school to school, from place to place. There are different variables to think through there. So we really realized that having strong structures for school improvement work were an essential piece of this. And one other thing, like if you have any questions as we're going through this, please feel free to put them in the chat, but we are going to, at this point, move into some some small group discussions. So Becky, in just a second, is going to put us into breakout groups, and really we're going to dig into some things. I'll leave it to the individual facilitators of those to facilitate or to give you some more framing. But essentially, we want to show you kind of what do those conversations look like, and how can we build into your contexts, and how can we support you in thinking about your contexts. So we're going to move in just a minute, but I hope these are fruitful and positive discussions for you. Hey, welcome back, everyone. One of the things we've learned in online learnings is that sometimes there's a participant drain when we do breakout groups, and people are like, nope, I'm out at that point. Oh, we got 25, cool. But yeah, the groups that we were able to do, was really excited by what we heard in our group. I know I heard that the other group was not even close to done. And we're just gonna do a quick share of what we were talking about and what was coming up. So Kathleen, or somebody from Kathleen's group, I would love to hear, I think it would be great for us to hear what was coming up for you and what was not done. What are the things that you were digging into?
I was in the middle of volunteering Shannon, but anyone else from our group who'd like to share, feel free.
Oh, there you go.
There you go.
Yeah, so I'll try. So we were working on the Padlet, just sort of thinking about assumptions, and named some perceptions that were elements of truth. So it was around those perceptions of charters taking kids away from the district, taking funding away from the district, and so there was the beginning of a conversation around, yes, there's truth there, and then where do we go from there, and talking about like the toggling between taking political action, and then what can you do in your own sort of circle of control, and that the collaborative district partnership that you were all talking about doesn't necessarily go towards the political realm, but certainly gets people jazzed up and ready for that kind of work. And I think that's sort of where we left off. Much more to talk about.
We also kind of dig, Shannon mentioned like the truth of it. We talked about how we dig into like the what's true about this and what isn't. So we do like really confront like that, because that's important, right? Spreading factual information is important. But then also tapping into like, what does this mean to you? Like, what are your beliefs? What are your feelings when you think that this is what's happening?
Anybody from our group wanna tackle that and share a little bit of what you heard and what was coming up? Yeah, so I can summarize real quick. A couple of things that we're thinking about were particularly, first, like the entry points that there are to do these collaborations, and so sometimes, you know, we talked about collaborating with the CSE and building good relationships there. We talked about I'm going to ask somebody else to summarize, actually. Dr. Lowry, are you able to did I say that right, by the way? Is Lowry?
Lori, Dr. Lori.
Lori, sorry.
Yes, yeah, I can summarize. I'm sitting here hearing the pins drop, wondering if I should have opened up my mic. So, okay, so we talked about a few different topics, one being like those stigmas between the district and the charters, and when there's not the communication. And not everybody experienced that in our group, but some cities, it seems like, or areas of cities more than others. And a lot of those stigmas end up being that us versus them, results in that us versus them mentality of, you know, if charters have X, then it's a deficit for the district. Or if the district has X, it's a deficit for the charter, versus like how are we all working collaboratively together. But then once there is that communication and people are realizing that we're all here to serve kids and on the same page, and those walls are taken down a little bit, then people tend to see the benefits going both ways and how we can support one another. Some of those relationships are, form through, people seeing the benefit of your organization or understanding that we're all in this together and it's not an us versus them mentality. So that's kind of like an overarch of what we talked about.
Thank you so much. With our last couple minutes, are there any major questions that anybody would want to surface just around, how we built district charter collaboration, around how you could increase that in your settings? Anything that anybody would want to raise that feels super pressing right in this moment?
Mike, can I just say that we shared some resources that we use to ground the work with our schools? We kind of talked about the Courageous Conversation norms, the compass. We talked about the ladder of inference a little bit and how those really do guide the process. So that might be something for us to paste in the chat maybe.
Yeah, and we can definitely, we will provide a link to our resource bank, which has a lot of that stuff in it, as well as just recognizing that so much of the value of those tools is around leveling the playing field, right? It's around making sure that we're coming at this when you are meeting, and one of the things that came up in our group was, and in the other group it sounds like, was around going in without a learning stance. For instance, I know everything and I'm just going to share my practices and people are going to learn from that, but I'm not going to learn anything. Or vice versa, which is I just got to go take, and I need everything. So really thinking about how we leveled that playing field through protocol, through having these conversations, through acknowledging growth areas and strengths from everybody in the room, right? And so much of that's important of no, we're all here as learners, we're all here to do that. So we'll definitely share that link in just a moment. I am gonna share my screen so we can start to close out. Can you all see my screen again? So I'm gonna ask, and I'll put this in the chat as well, first that we do one more little Padlet and just kind of make a commitment, which is, as you're thinking about this, and I just pasted it into the chat as well, if you wanted to better partner with your district, if you just wanted to build some new relationship, some new place, or build on something that exists, right? That you already have a relationship with a principal, for instance, and there might be a new level to take that to. If you go to this Padlet and just enter, if I want to better partner with my district, what should I do tomorrow, next week, or next month? We'd love to hear what you're thinking about or what you would commit to in terms of moving that ahead. Give a minute just for people to fill that out. And I like that newly elected trustees one is concrete action steps. As you're doing that, we will also, there's the resource bank link, which was also posted in the chat. We are also doing an archival website of our work, which is not yet complete, but hopefully will be. And so as we close out, I really want to thank Paul, Kathleen, Kate, Yuminwin, thank Yomika and the rest of the Northeast Charter Schools Network team for welcoming us here. I don't know, do you want us to pass it back to you to close out?
Hi, yeah, I'll take it back to close out. Thank you so much. Thank you for joining us today and sharing your information that you have. We know we had a strong group today with us today, but I want to note as well that it will be posted on, remind everybody, it's on our webinar. If you have school leader colleagues who didn't get an opportunity to participate, please let them know it's going to be posted on our webinar and check it out on our page. It's posted on our webpage, check it out there. Thank you again so much, Charter District Collaborative, for joining us today. Everyone on the phone, please remember that we will be back again next Tuesday for our weekly webinar. Have a great weekend.
Thank you. Thank you too.